Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Chivas Regal 12 Year. This is a blended Scotch whiskey bottled at 80% ABV. Now usually I would talk about the blender or the brand or the distiller or whoever, but I gotta be honest, there's just not a whole lot going on with this brand. I'll talk to you about what I found though. So it is very popular. Obviously everybody here has seen this in the store. It's the second most popular behind Johnnie Walker Black, and that doesn't mean it's interesting. So James and John are the Chivas brothers, and back in the 1800s they worked at a grocery store. And James, who, he was kind of a little bit more creative, he found that there was a desire for smoother whiskeys. Now his grocery store would sell whiskeys that they had brought in, but he wanted to make something smoother. So he started blending the stuff that he was able to get his hands on. And over time he actually developed something that tasted pretty good, and it was called Royal Glen D. And he sold that for a little while, about 10 years, when 10 years later, he created Royal Strathathen. I obviously am going to say that wrong. I'm not even going to refilm it because I've tried to pronounce that about 40 times and I just can't get it. So one of you correct me if there's a better way to say it in the comments. Anyway, in the early 1900s, the Chivas brothers, basically, they wanted to prepare something that they could sell to the United States market because we were just whiskey hungry. And that's where Chivas Regal came from. They ended up kind of producing this, mass producing it, selling it in the US, and then over a little bit of time, when they found that there was just a huge amount of demand, they actually created the first original luxury whiskey, which was their 25-year-old version. Now, after a little bit longer, they came up with a few different expressions, basically the Chivas Regal Extra, the 18-year, a re-release of the 25-year, and that's it. Like I said, not a whole lot interesting. The original luxury Scotch was pretty cool, but outside of that, not a whole lot going on. This whiskey is a blend of many different single malts, but some of the main pieces are from Strathyla and from Longmorn. It is chill filtered, it is colored, and it is a blend. So consistency is important, which makes sense why they would chill filter it and color it. So I'm not really gonna, give them too many negative points on that. It makes sense. That being said, I hate the whole concept. All right, let's go ahead and get into the nosing and the tasting of this. So, it does have a screw top, which, whatever. Not a huge fan, although I will say I'm starting to hate it a little bit less because at least it makes it a little easier to travel. And I tend to bring some bottles around with me nowadays. All right, let's go ahead and give this a nose. Now the nose is actually pretty impressive. For this whiskey, I was surprised when I first nosed it. A few of the things that you get right off the bat, you get caramel, and then it's kind of followed up a little bit by some subtle vanilla. And then surprisingly, you get a little bit of graham cracker in there, which I'm trying to remember if I've ever actually had that note before. I might have to find a new icon for that. So then you also have this sweetness, which I cannot put my finger on. It's there, it's almost like a fake sweetness. I was joking with somebody earlier, he said aspartame, but obviously that's not that. It's just a very subtle sweetness that I can't put my finger on. Anyway, let's go ahead and give this a taste. Cheers. And that's where the disappointment starts. So this is approachable. It is not terrible. It's honestly, it's not. It's just a letdown after a nose like that. It's almost like it could have been fantastic if it could follow that nose, but instead the taste is just a letdown. It's a little bit grainy. It's got that same kind of fake sweetness to it, which is not unappreciated when it's kind of compared to that graininess that you're getting as well. But ultimately, there's really just nothing going on in here. It tastes like alcohol. So, I don't know. Let's go into the kind of overall here. I think that you could probably get a sense that I'm not in love with this whiskey. In fact, writing this episode was a bit of a labor of love. I've literally tried to write this episode 5 different times. And every time that I did, I just kept getting disheartened at the fact that it was not an interesting whiskey to write about. And because of that, I kept putting it off, I've had this bottle for a while at this point. Now, I considered buying a new one just in the event that maybe it would taste a little bit different, but it won't. I've actually tried it at a bar about 3 weeks ago just to make sure that I wasn't, kind of selling it short, and it tastes exactly the same. So this is not one that being open in a bottle really affects too much. Makes sense too. It's not a complex whiskey. So when I was in Austin a little while ago for the opening of the Crowded Barrel Distillery, I had a conversation with Rex, and I told him the trouble I was having writing this episode. Figured I could, kind of pick his brain what he does when he's uninterested in the whiskey that he's reviewing. And he said, just film it. And I kind of asked him to elaborate. He's like, it's not your job to make the whiskey interesting. It's your job to tell people about the whiskey and tell them why it sucks, or if it sucks, or why it's good, or if it's good, So that kind of hit home, and I went and I wrote the episode. So thank you, Rex, if you happen to be watching this. I appreciate it, and you are the sole reason I'm doing this episode. Anyway, let's kind of just wrap this up. In my mind, this whiskey is not necessary to taste. Chances are, if you're watching a channel like this, you have tried some fantastic whiskeys, or even if you're at the start of your whiskey journey, you're probably already past this one. If you wouldn't go out of your way to have some of the lower end Johnnie Walkers, or like a Cuddy or Canadian, just like some low end whiskeys, then skip this one too. You're not going to miss out on anything. So that does it for this episode of the Whiskey Dictionary. Thank you for joining me, and have a great rest of your night. Cheers.